Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November 22nd edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona. I'll be joined in just a second by my co-host, Craig Milkowski. This week on the podcast, we're going to talk about 6 stakes races from across the country. Not a ton of major stakes races happening this weekend. We've got a couple of Grade 3 events, one at Aqueduct, one at Del Mar, and then north of the border up in Canada, we've got some graded stakes action up there that we'll touch upon a little bit later in the show. But we're kind of waiting in the wings for the big racing to come along in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, next weekend there is the Kentucky Jockey Club, and then after that, we'll have the Cigar Mile weekend at Aqueduct. We're actually going to be off the air next week. It's Thanksgiving week, of course, so we're not putting out any podcasts next week, either the TimeformUS Pacecast or the TimeformUS Forecast, but we'll be back with the TimeformUS Pacecast just over a week from today. So, Craig, how are you doing? I'm ready to talk about some stakes action.
Yeah, I certainly am. I just want to say I'll take the fall for no podcast. I'm going on vacation next week, so I don't get many of those since horse racing never stops. But I'm greatly looking forward to it and looking forward to talking about these races.
Nice. Hope you enjoy that, and it's good to have a little break. Let's start at Aqueduct. We can actually bookend this show with races from Aqueduct. We've got one on Saturday and one from Sunday. The feature race at Aqueduct on Saturday is the Grade 3 Red Smith, going 1 3/8 on the inner turf course at Aqueduct. And this is a pretty fun race. There are a lot of contenders in here. There's going to be a prohibitive favorite at the number 7, Sadler's Joy. This Tom Albertrani trainee is obviously the class of the field. He's been competing in Grade 1 company for the past couple of seasons, really has been holding his own against some of the top U.S. turf horses that are out there. The problem is he's not really a winning type. It's hard to time his move correctly because he's one of these deep closers who often gets into trouble. How much do you want to trust this horse as a win candidate?
Well, I've promised myself I will never, ever, ever bet Sadler's Joy again. So I'm going to stick to it here. It won't be hard because, as you say, he is going to be the favorite, and I'm not one who's often going to bet favorites. So I'm definitely against him. I won't be shocked if he wins. He's the most talented horse in here. But like you said, he definitely has his issues. Sometimes he tends to quit when he makes the lead, and you got to time it just perfectly. So I have no problems going against him in here. I did want to bring up Tiz a Slam. As you know, we had a bit of internal discussion about him and why he's so far back on the pace projector. And when I did a first glance, I said, oh, there's got to be a problem here. But we actually took a pretty deep look at this, and it's a really strange race in that normally these races at 11 furlongs and 12 furlongs draw horses that have been running at the same distances. But that's not really the case here. In this Red Smith, we got many, many horses that have been running at much shorter distances, stretching out. So I just wanted to clarify why this horse is so far back. He's a horse that likes to be near the front, but he's going to have to deal with a whole lot more speed in here than he has in the past. You can look in our past performances and see a couple of his wins that were 1.5 miles. We had blue fractions, so the pace was slow. So I just wanted to point out the main reason this horse is so far back is his adjusted TimeformUS fractions are just so much slower than many of the other horses in here that even with his running style, he's not as fast as those in our opinion.
That's a good point. And I do think we have to talk about the pace projector in this race because it's somewhat unusual to see a fast pace predicted in a marathon turf race like this. We'll see if that actually plays out. I think this pace could really go a few different ways because while there are a couple of confirmed front runners, there are a number of horses who want to be close to the pace that could potentially push into a fast paced territory. But sometimes we see these riders ride the race differently and you never really know what you're going to get. So it's going to be interesting to see how this race unfolds in the early going. I do want to talk about plenty of other contenders in here aside from Sadler's Joy, because I think you could consider a lot of these runners as alternative options. What do you make of a horse like Red Knight? I think he could be among or vying for second choice on. I've got him as second choice on the morning line. I think he could be among the second choices vying for that position behind Sadler's Joy. Red Knight is a horse that definitely prefers these marathon distances. I think overall his form is just a little bit dirtied up by the fact that they've tried to run him shorter a couple times. He has a race that was off the turf 3 back. He had some poor trips early in the year. He ran pretty well last time and earned a respectable speed figure in that point of entry, but can he handle the step back up in class?
Yeah, that's a question. Other than Sadler's Joy, I don't know that this is all that strong of a grade 3 race. So I've kind of settled on a couple here as my alternatives, and that would be Red Knight, who you talked about. I have no knocks on him. That 120 Timeform US speed figure certainly fits with everybody else in here and it is better. And the other one I like a little bit is Nakamura, who is going to be a closer in here. He's going to need that pace that he gets, but he's one who's proven he doesn't mind the 1.5 miles. And I think he probably got a little bit of a tough trip last time. Marzo, who was also in this field, got the jump on him. But I think the tide could turn if the pace develops to be at least honest and maybe a little bit quick. So at 10-1, I'm certainly going to be using him on my tickets too.
Yeah, Nakamura is a horse that I definitely want to use also. I agree with your assessment of the Sycamore last time. I think Marzo is interesting as well because I always am afraid of these Mike Maker horses once he gets them into good form off the claim, and especially when they're stretching out to these marathon distances, that's his specialty. But I did think that Nakamura had the slightly tougher trip last time because he was just a little rank early. He was wide the entire way. I like that he's getting Jose Ortiz back aboard here because I thought Jose Ortiz gave this horse just a perfect ride 3-back when he won that allowance race at Saratoga. He's got to step up in class and beat some tougher horses here. I don't deny that, but he's one that I would definitely use in here. The thing that I was just uncertain about and why I ultimately landed on the horse that I did is that if I'm going to play against Sadler's Joy, I'm not sure that I want to do it with another closer because I sort of feel like Sadler's Joy is the best of the closers, and I'm just not sure that a horse like Nakamura or Marzo has got that closing kick to really forge past Sadler's Joy at the end of a race if that one is in the mix at the end. So I'm going to give one more shot to Glorious Empire. We'll see if – because you can look at this horse two ways. You could say that he's just been off form so far this year and he's not the same horse that he once was now as an 8-year-old. Or you could say his last 2 races are just too short because he's always been best going these marathon distances. He proved that towards the middle of last year when he won races like the Sword Dancer and dead heated for the victory in that Bowling Green. His last race is a bit of a concern because he was supposed to do better going the 9 furlongs, a distance that hasn't been a huge problem for him in the past. But then again, he got kind of unsettled in the post-parade that day and was sweating up a bit, and that's often a problem for him. He's a horse that tends to lose his cool prior to races. He actually ran pretty well 2-back in that Baltimore-Washington Turf Cup going a distance that is just far too short for him, a flat mile. I think that there's still something left with this horse. There's still something in the tank. And I think Edgar Prado rides these marathon races pretty well. He's going to be sending this horse to the lead from the outside post. We'll see how fast the pace ultimately is, but I do think he's going to be in front of this field early. I'm just hoping he can refine his form because he's the one horse in this race who's already proven that he can run at Sadler's Joy's level. He just has to get back to it.
Yeah, I have no problem with him. I kind of went the other direction, but if he makes that clear lead, he's going to be tough. He's run big figures in the past. I just haven't liked what I've seen from him so far, so I think it is a little bit of a leap of faith. If I use him on my horizontal tickets, it'd be more as a B or C type, but I won't be shocked if he takes this field wire to wire because he has shown that ability in the past. He's third off the layoff, and his races haven't been terrible. And as you said, they're at a much shorter distance. So very interesting race, and I think we got to watch the tote board pretty closely because I don't know how you made a morning line for this race outside of Sadler's Joy because I think you could have picked any of 3 or 4 horses all grouped together right behind him, and he's one of them.
Yeah, it's a very confusing one. I totally agree with that. It's a race where you do want to watch the tote board and just find some value because a lot of these horses can win. And I think once you get past Sadler's Joy, it's pretty confusing. Let's move on to another stakes race on Saturday. We'll head out to California to look at the major race at Del Mar this weekend, the Grade 3 Native Diver Stakes, going 1 1/8 on the main track there. Much smaller field here, but it's no less competitive because you do have a favorite in Roadster. I imagine he's going to be a pretty prohibitive favorite. I think they've got him 5-2 on the morning line. I imagine he'll be pretty short in here. What do you make of Roadster stretching back out in distance? Because he just missed going the 7 furlongs last time upon return to the Damascus. I know he got the 1 1/8 in the Sansanita Derby back in the spring. I always have been a little bit skeptical of how far this horse really wants to go. And personally, I don't see him as having a huge edge here. How did you view him?
I think he ran well in his return. I am a little hesitant about the distance, but personally, I think the older horses in this field just are not very good. Leading score mid-court and 235, they're just okay. They've been running figures in the 115 range, which is just not good for grade 3 older horses. So I think this race comes down to the 2-3-year-olds, Roadster and Extra Hope. And just based on value alone, I would probably side with Extra Hope because I also think he ran very well in that return race. He hadn't been seen since the Rebel. There are distance questions with him as well, but I could say the same for leading scorer. He actually has a pace advantage according to our pace projector. He's shown on a clear lead. There's not much other speed in here. But like we've already talked about with Roadster, he's a horse. I don't see anything that says he wants to get a mile and an eighth either. So I'm probably going to side with the 3-year-olds here and just watch the tote. I totally agree with you. There's no way we're getting 5-2 on Roadster. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's 4-5 at post time.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with your assessment here. I was just not thrilled with the horses coming out of that comma to the top stakes. I didn't love the performances by any of those horses. Leading score, I mean, I guess he was setting an honest pace that day, but I don't see him getting the mile and an eighth distance. And I know Midcourt's won the 3 in a row. I just haven't seen him really show enough that he's of this quality. I think he's got to step forward, and the same with 235. So I agree with you. The 3-year-olds are where I want to go. And I actually like Extra Hope quite a bit in this race because I thought he ran really well in the Damascus last time under circumstances that weren't ideal. We talked a lot on Breeders' Cup weekend about how tough the kickback was to run through at Santa Anita, both on Friday and Saturday's cards. And Extra Hope just was taking a ton of kickback coming around the far turn. It was those horses ahead of him were battling for the front end. Roadster made that early move to challenge, and Extra Hope just kind of had to sit in behind them coming into the quarter pole, run through kickback in the stretch. I thought he was actually finishing pretty well at the end of that race. When I take a look at his PPs, I say this is a horse that kind of improved a little bit when they finally stretched him out in distance as a 2-year-old into his 3-year-old season. So I don't have any problem with him stretching back out here to the mile and an eighth distance. And I just think he's still got some upside, whereas we might have seen the best already of some of the older horses. And I'm just not thrilled with Roadster at a short price. I kind of don't think he's going to be the biggest price of this field, but that doesn't bother me. I think he'd be a fair price at anything around 7-2 or 4-1 in here. So I, like you, I'm going with Extra Hope in the Native Diver. Let's head up to Woodbine because they've got some pretty nice stakes races this weekend, both on Saturday and Sunday at Woodbine. We'll begin with the 8th race on Saturday. It's the Kennedy Road, grade 2 event on the synthetic track going 6 furlongs. And the star attraction in this race is obviously Pink Lloyd. I was reading that his connections are hoping he can make a go at the Horse of the Year award in Canada with a victory in this race because other than his odd performance last time, that was sort of a non-performance because he was declared a non-starter when he blew the break in the Bold Venture. He's been undefeated otherwise this year, and he's had a pretty nice season, one of his better ones. So he'll be a candidate for Horse of the Year up in Canada if he wins this Kennedy Road. The question is, can he get it done? Because I think there are at least a couple of rivals in this race who could be a thorn in his side.
Yeah, that's a tough race for me. I'm still a little ticked off they declared Pink Lloyd a non-starter that day, but I'll try to get away from that. I'll get over it by next year, I'm sure. My one concern with this horse is he might be developing some gait issues. That's 2 races in a row where he had trouble, but he's clearly the best horse in the field. This is the biggest field he's faced in a long time, but I don't think it's a particularly strong one. If you look at Extravagant Kid, he's probably the most logical contender in here, but he's only tried synthetic twice, both times against Pink Lloyd, and both times he lost. If I was going to look for another horse to beat him, I might go with number 4, Richie's in the House. He's a horse who, if he gets out clean and Pink Lloyd doesn't, he may have a tactical edge. He's run decent speed figures, not quite as good as Pink Lloyd. So I admit it might be a bit of a stretch to go against him here, but if I was going to pick one, that would be the one I landed on.
Yeah, I don't think I'd argue that Pink Lloyd is the most likely winner. That's probably true. For me, I would just take a small shot against him because of the value. I agree with what you said about him might have developing some gait at this point in his career. He still is able to win races. My problem is that a lot of his efforts prior to venture last time were against some pretty uncompetitive fields. I mean, he was 1-5, 1-10 odds in some of those races. This is a tougher spot than that. And particularly due to the presence of Extravagant Kid. I think Extravagant Kid's going to be a tough rival for Pink Lloyd in this race. He's made just 3 starts on synthetic tracks in his career. 2 of them have come at Woodbine, and both of those Woodbine efforts have been really good. Both were losses to Pink Lloyd, I believe, and he ran some nice speed figures in each of them. Most recently in the Jacques Cartier back in May of this year. And the one question I have for Extravagant Kid is the distance, because it seems like as a turf sprinter, he's more of one of those 5.5 horses. The 6 furlongs, I think, is always going to be a little bit tough for him. But his last race is a lot better than it seems, because he was just in a ton of trouble in that Woodford through the stretch, just stymied inside. Jose Ortiz doing the right thing, trying to save ground. Some horses had trouble in that race, and I think he took the worst of it, just never able to get through. He would have been much closer that day, if not having won the race, if he hadn't had that trouble. So he's in better form than that. And I just like his synth performances overall. Also, there's not a ton of speed in this race, and that could work against Pink Lloyd. And if they send Extravagant Kid aside, as the pace indicates, I think that can make him a little tough.
Yeah, again, I don't really have any going against him. I just think Extravagant Kid will be probably the second choice for sure. And I'm not totally in love with him either. So I don't know if I'll even bet on this race, but it's one will be interesting to watch. And if, like you said, if Pink Lloyd wins, I don't even know if he has to win to be the Canadian Horse of the Year. I'm not sure who else would beat him. To be honest, he still has a pretty good resume, but I just didn't find a lot of strength in the rest of this field outside of those 2. So kind of hard to get excited about anybody for me.
A race that might offer some more value opportunities, depending on how you feel about the favorites, is the race that follows that on Saturday at Woodbine, the Coronation Futurity for the Ontario-bred 2-year-olds, going 1 1/8. Pretty good test of stamina for these juveniles. Not too many 1 1/8 stakes races at this time of year, or at all, for the 2-year-olds on any surface. The favorite in this race is going to be the number 7 horse, Muskoka Gold, who is coming off a second-place finish in the Grade 3 Gray Stakes up at Woodbine. This horse is a kind of a difficult read for me. He ran pretty well to win the Cup and Saucer 2 back on the turf. His other races, both of them on synthetic, to me have not been quite as impressive. Last time out, I know the running line, just how it's published, looks impressive because he made up a ton of ground in the stretch. When you go back and watch that race, it's kind of a letdown because this horse was just never really going anywhere. He was basically under a full-out drive and under the whip from the half-mile pole. Like, he didn't want to participate, and the rider really had to get into him to just keep him in touch with the field. And eventually the race just kind of fell apart, and he kind of sucked up for that second-place finish, never looking like he was really going to win the race. A repeat of that performance, I guess it still makes him the horse to beat. I just didn't love the optics that day, and I'd be willing to take a shot against him.
Yeah, I really didn't know what to make of this race. I mean, it's a big purse race for this time of year for 2-year-olds, 1 1/8, as you said. It's drawn some shippers that we otherwise probably wouldn't see because of the purse. We got Graham Motion shipping one in, Steve Asmussen shipping one in. So I think this race is a real puzzle, and I had trouble coming up with any real solid opinions. The one horse that caught my attention a little bit at a big price was the 6 Northern Thunder. He's had some gait issues in his last 2, so there's no guarantee he can overcome those. But if he's able to, I think he could run better than he's shown in the last couple. He was in the Gray Stakes, which is Canada's best 2-year-old race before the Breeders' Cup, and I thought he ran okay after his gait problems, and the extra distance might help him some. Again, I'm not in love with him, but at 20-1, he's a horse I'm looking to use in exotics. But I'm with you. I wasn't in love with the favorites. I don't think they have any particularly edge over anybody else in here, but it's a really tough race to gauge with a lot of horses trying synthetic for the first time. We got shippers coming in, so I would definitely look for some value. I would go against the favorites, but again, it's not another race that I love from a betting perspective.
Yeah, this race actually interests me a little bit because I found a couple of long shots that are pretty intriguing. The one that I'd probably make my top selection if I was making selections in this race is the number 3 Kunal. If you watch that Cup and Saucer, I know we finished behind Muskoka Gold, and Please Call Me Back were going to be the 2 favorites in this race. I don't know what the plan was with Kunal, but it wasn't a successful plan because this horse actually broke well and was up close in the early going. And for whatever reason, Alan Garcia took a hard hold of this horse, like he was under instructions to make sure he was last going into or going down the backstretch. I mean, he was just intent on getting this horse to the back of the pack. And I mean, he did it. This horse got to the back of the pack. I'm just not sure that's where you want it to be, because the two horses that dominated that race were up close throughout. Coming into the stretch, Kunal was in no position to make any impact on the race, and he was just flying through the lane. He passed 9 horses in the stretch and got up for third, was really finishing well at the end. I mean, you look at him, I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, I'm assuming he might have been a private purchase out of his first 2 starts, because he began his career at Penn National and then went to Timonium, not where you typically see one of these Ontario breds beginning his career, but he's got a nice pedigree on him. He's by Temple City, which suggests he wanted to run all day, so he's improved going the mile and 16th last time. I'm not worried about the mile and an 8th. And his second dam is actually Ventura, who was that good filly for Bobby Frankel a number of years ago. She was a turf router who also cut back and was successful, I believe, winning the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint over the synthetic track at Santa Anita back in the day. So Kunal, I think, has real potential here, because his last race is deceptively strong. And getting the blinkers on here, I'm not going to be surprised if they totally change around the tactics and use some of the speed that he showed going back to his debut, and that could make him dangerous. So I like Kunal here. I'd also use Graham Motion's horse, Tomcat Black. I know he's a maiden. He had some real trouble in that one synthetic start at Woodbine 2 back. I don't know if he was going to win that day, but he was just kind of buried in traffic for from about the 5/16 pole to the 8th pole. He finally got out late and was running on at the end. He handled the stretch out well enough on the dirt at Laurel last time, but the dirt's not really supposed to be his preferred surface, because his dam was more of a synthetic turf horse. She actually wanted to run all day. She won the 1.25 mile Wonder Where during her career, so the distance is supposed to help this horse as well. They're both going to be prices, so I would use them a little bit, because I'm just not thrilled with the favorites in here.
Well, all I'll add is you made a compelling case for Kunal, and I will definitely go back and watch that replay, because it's hard to get that from the running line, but I know what a great race watcher you are, so I'm going to go take another look at that one for sure.
Let's move on to one more stakes race from Woodbine on Sunday's card. The feature that day is the Grade 2 Bessarabian Stakes, and boy, they got a pretty good field for this stakes race late in the season on the synthetic track. I mean, you've got horses coming in from all different directions, horses that have had success on dirt, on turf, horses that have been running in these stakes races up at Woodbine, 12 horses. The favorite is probably going to be the number 6 Zenobia, who's shipping in for Jonathan Thomas. She is a turf specialist coming off a win in the Grade 3 Athenia at Belmont Park. A repeat of that performance, or really any of her recent speed figures in the United States, is going to make her pretty tough in here. I don't love horses cutting back in distance like this, and I also don't love horses switching to synthetic after running well on another surface all the time. At a short price, I kind of want to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. And where I looked right away was Gamble's Candy. She's a horse that just loves Woodbine. She's just a 3-year-old filly, but she's won here several times. She loves the synthetic surface. She hasn't been 7 furlongs yet. I think her longest was last time at 6.5, but she proved that wasn't a problem. She's a horse who has proved she doesn't have to be on the lead. She has decent speed figures, and if she's anywhere near that 6-1 morning line, she's a horse I really like in here because I don't think she doesn't have to have the lead, but she's a horse who looks like she's going to get a pretty easy one to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the trip that Gamble's Candy projects to get. And to me, she's just one of these improving 3-year-olds who I don't want to scrutinize her prior form too much, because I know it's just her last race that makes her competitive here. That doesn't bother me so much, because she might just be improving at this time of the year as a pretty lightly raced younger horse. So I agree with everything you said. I think that she's a very logical player in this race, and we'll see what kind of price we get. But to me, she's kind of the horse to beat in here. I prefer her to the other horses based at Woodbine. I mean, a horse like Special Relativity is probably going to take some money on the outside for Norm McKnight, whose barn is just always on fire up at Woodbine. But when I look through the fields that she's been facing and compare that to the race that Gamble's Candy won last time, even though Gamble's Candy was facing restricted 3-year-old company and Special Relativity was facing older horses, I kind of prefer the field that Gamble's Candy beat to the field that Special Relativity beat, or was second in last time. So I'm not sure that I really want her if she's a shorter price. The horse that I'm considering who's going to be a price in this race is the number 11, Lady Mamba. I was just saying that I don't love horses that are trying synthetic for the first time in these situations, but that's mostly about horses that are going to be short prices. Lady Mamba is going to be a bigger price, so I don't mind taking a shot with her, even though that's not an angle that I love. she just seems like a horse that might really fit these conditions because she's run well on turf in the past, but she's often found the route distances a mile or farther to just be a little bit too much for her to handle. She's often fading at the end of those races, but she's shown some ability. You go back to that race at the Fairgrounds in March when she was fourth behind Beau Recall. That was a good effort when she would carved out the fractions that day. Since then, she's shown some ability sprinting. She went the 6 furlongs at Belmont last time. That was just maybe a little bit too short for her, but she ran well against horses like Fire Key and Goldwood, who, if you look up their PPs, I know they're not synthetic horses, but just from a speed figure standpoint, they stack up very well against this field. And Lady Mamba only lost that race by 3/4 of a length. Based on that evidence, I think 7 furlongs might be the best distance for her. Wharf runs, they certainly can perform on synthetic tracks, so I'm not really worried about that. And she'll be a price in this race, so I would take a shot with her, but I agree with you that Gamble's Candy is the horse you can rely on. Let's move on to the final race we're going to discuss this weekend. It's the 8th race from Aqueduct on Sunday, heading back to Aqueduct. It's a New York bred stakes race, a New York Stallion Series race, the Thunder Rumble, going the 7 furlongs for the older horses. And I thought there were a lot of contenders to consider in this spot. The favorite's probably going to be the number 4 Gold for the King. He's a horse who hasn't actually won a race since he won this very race last year, back in November of 2018. He won that by almost 10 lengths as the heavy favorite. Things haven't really gone well for him since then. He's been short prices on a number of occasions, has disappointed quite a bit, hasn't always gotten the best trips, but when he has, he hasn't sealed the deal. So he's a horse that I kind of want to take a shot against him here.
Yeah, this race is one when I opened it up, and I always start out on the preview page. This is one of the more misleading preview pages you'll ever see from TimeformUS because we make those spotlight figures. We kind of go and look to pick out the best figure a horse has run at similar conditions, and every horse in this field is right around the 110 to 120 range, even higher in the case of the 7 Arthur's Hope. But when you start looking through the past performances, none of the horses have run anywhere near that lately for a variety of reasons. But there's just some really shaky past performances in there. The best actual last TimeformUS speed figure from the last race is a 109 from number 7 Arthur's Hope. So that told me right away, you really kind of dig through these races and see what's going on here and what's happening. And I'm against the favorites as you are with Gold for the King. He just hasn't run very well lately, in my opinion. I mean, he's been short prices. He's been easily beaten. He made an easy lead 2 back and was still run down, finished 3rd. So I'm against him. My boy Tate, who I think is the second choice or co-second choice on the morning line, has been off well over a year. I mean, he was in great form, but that was at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018 before tailing off, and he's been away a long time. He could certainly win, but it's not a horse I'm going to take at anything near a short price. So I eventually wound up settling on Arthur's Hope, who has just run some huge races in the past. He also comes off a layoff. He's been away about 4 months, but he's a horse who had a similar layoff when he shipped to this country, and he was able to win off the bench doing that before. And I'm just kind of taking a shot at a price that he's ready to run. His workouts look good. He's been working out regularly and pretty quick. So against a field of a bunch of question marks, he was the best one I could find.
I do want to say I'm not totally against Gold for the King in this race. I do want to just briefly make the case for him because I think he's likely to run better than last time in this race because when you watch that Hudson, he did not get a good trip that day. He was sort of shuffled back early in a race that didn't feature any pace whatsoever. He's got the speed to be much closer to the pace, but because he didn't break well and was shuffled back in the early going, he just got the trip that was totally wrong for him. And he had to steady a bit coming around the far turn. Joel Rosario put him down on the inside, which behind horses that were going nowhere, just not where you wanted to be. I think he ran better than T Loves a Fight in that race, so I do prefer Gold for the King to the other horse coming out of the Hudson. I still think he's going to be an underlay, though, because he's always a short price, and I think there are other options you can look at in this race. I, too, landed on Arthur's Hope. We agree on this one. I just think Arthur's Hope is going to work out the right trip because I don't see a ton of really true front-running speed in this race outside of Binkster, who I don't believe is good enough, and Arthur's Hope. And if they're up front sharing the lead, I just think that's going to be a great trip for Arthur's Hope because if you look through his past performances, He runs some big speed figures on occasion and then doesn't show up at all on other occasions, but he does run well when he's able to get one of those forwardly placed trips. And I think he's going to get one of those trips that he prefers to get in here, stalking outside of another horse, or if not on the lead outright. I know he's been off for a little while, and that's a concern, but I agree with you. The workouts look good coming into this race. I imagine something happened last time that necessitated the layoff because that was not one of his better efforts down at Delaware. But they're bringing him back now in a pretty ambitious spot. So I like to see that. He's run well with Aqueduct in the past. 7 furlongs is a good distance for him. So I agree with your assessment of Arthur's Hope. And if he's around 5 or 6 to 1, I think that's a perfectly fair price on him. So hopefully we get something close to that because I think this is a good spot for this horse.
The good news for our listeners is, for the most part, when we agree, we've actually done pretty good. That doesn't always turn out to be the case, but in the few months on our show when we agree, we've had some fairly solid opinions. So hoping it continues this week as we agreed on a few of these races, and looking forward to the vacation and talking to you guys. We got a lot of big racing on Thanksgiving weekend that we'll talk about on the Pacecast next week. As David said, we're not, or the week after, we're not going to have any shows this week. And then we got the big stakes races in New York the week after. So a lot of really exciting stuff coming up, but I'll be watching and betting most of the races this weekend. Looking forward to it and hope we added some help to some people's opinions here.
Yep, definitely concur with all of that. And when we come back on the Pacecast in about a week and a half, we'll probably take a look back at these past 2 weeks of racing so we don't miss out on anything. Good luck this week, guys. Thanks for listening as always. You can always check out the TimeformUS Pacecast and the TimeformUS Forecast on drf.com, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel so you can check out all of this content. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again in about a week and a half.